How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today was done Daf Yud Ches, Daf 18 of Shechitah. Chullin, friends, Daf 18 is an awesome daf. Lots of awesome dafs here, Shechitah Chullin, which is unbelievable. I think it might be a big one, but don't be scared. It's gonna be there. I'm telling you, there's a lot of really great stuff on this daf. The whole daf is great. Particularly on the second half of the daf, we're really getting into Shechitah, like cutthroat Shechitah. There's going to be some kind of graphic slides here, just like the inner workings, I guess you could say. You know, lifting the hide and looking inside of the Shechitah. So, but there's going to be a lot of details. But it took me ages and ages to prepare not ages and ages, but maybe ages to kind of prepare all the slides and stuff. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because just to give like an idea of there's a lot to see here. There's a lot to see on Daf 18. It's it feels like really Shechitah-y, which isn't, I'm a vegetarian. I don't even eat meat, but it feels like we're really kind of getting into the inner workings of Shechitah and how that works. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. What do we have ahead of us on Daf 18 of Shechitah Chullin? Showing a knife to a sage and really what happens when you don't. We're going to kind of start off with that. Then we get to a new Mishnah where we discuss slaughtering with a sickle. We had mentioned in the previous Mishnah that if you slaughter with like a serrated sickle, so it's problematic. We're going to learn a little bit more about that. Machlokes Beishami Basil. And then we get to a new Mishnah where we get into Shechitah, like slicing open the throat, Shechitah, with a particular focus on the trachea. And we'll discuss the location for Shechitah, right? Where on the neck do you do the Shechitah? So there's different opinions about where's too high, where's too low. So we will be discussing that. And finally, Hagrama. Hagrama was one of the 5 on the Shechitah checklist from Daf Tes, from Daf 9. Hagrama is it's a psul in Shechitah if the slice is beyond the range. So before that, right? So the topic before this was the location of Shechitah. So we'll be discussing different opinions on where that location is. And then the next topic of Hagrama is what happens if you go beyond that location at all, a little bit. So anyways, this is what we have ahead of us, jam-packed, like really lots of content on this daf. Again, it might be a little bit of a long one, but it'll be worth it, I think. We're going to have a very, very visual daf, at least really the second half. There'll be a lot to look at. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Come join me. And let's have a great time here on Daf Yud Ches, Daf Chai, which is a little bit ironic, Daf Life, when we're talking about kind of taking the life of an animal, but obviously we take the life of the animal in order to provide life to people who will be eating that animal in order to live. So friends, here we go. Let's jump in. Let's enjoy ourselves. Daf Yud Ches, Daf 18 of Shechitah Chullin. Here we go. We begin on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. 4 lines from the bottom. Amr Funa Bar Rav Katina Amr Rab Shimon ben Lakish Shalosh Pegimis Hain. There are 3 notches. Pegimas Etzim be Pesach, by Korban Pesach. Of course, the halach is, the pasuk says ve'etzim l'sish berubo. You can't break any bones of the Korban Pesach. So if you break a bone, so if you make a notch, we're going to talk about the size of the notch momentarily, but if you make a notch in the bones of a Korban Pesach, so then you're in violation of the lav of Etzem Leisish Bruvo. Pigimas Ozen Bebechor. After we learn Masechta Chullin, we will learn Masechta Bechoris. In Masechta Bechoris, we will talk about different kinds of mums, that if a Bechor gets a mum, it can be eaten. It does not need to be redeemed. It does not need to be offered as a Korban. You just eat it when it gets a mum. So if the ear, for example, of the Bechor gets a pigima, gets a notch, gets a nick in it, so that could be a mum for a Bechor. Pigimas mum b'kachim and other kachim. The reason why this is separated into its own item here on the list is because Bechor could be things specific for the Korban Bechor, for males, female korbanos can have things that are unique to females. For example, certain mum related to female genitalia that don't apply to males. So therefore, it is a separate item on the list to say that there are pagimas for male korbanos and female korbanot. Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda pagimas sakin. Rav Chizda adds to the list a notch in a knife that we learned about yesterday. The reason why the first list was absent, why the notch in the knife was absent from the first three items, right? Meaning we initially listed Korban Pesach and then the two different types of male and female korbanos. Initially, right, Rish Lakish had left out the pigima in the knife. The reason being, the idach b'chulin lo kamari, they were not talking about chulin. They were talking about Korban Pesach. They were talking about male korbanos, female korbanos. Here, the notch in the knife, we've really been talking about in the context of chulin, so therefore they had left it out. B'chulin pigimason kidei pigimas hamizbeach. And in terms of the notch, in terms of the pigima, how big is this notch that we're talking about? The size of the notch on a that would make the mizbeach pasul. What is the size of a notch on the mizbeach that will make the mizbeach pasul? Kedei shetachgor ba tziporin, that your fingernail will get stuck on it. If it's big enough that if you're like sliding your fingernail down, whatever is being slid down, it will get stuck on this notch. That is too big. However, we have a contradiction. What is the notch of the altar? Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer says, Rajbi, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, tefach. If it is the size of a tefach, Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer kezayis. Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov says kezayis. So that is both of those options, kezayis, tefach, are larger than a nick that your fingernail will get stopped on. Lokasha, it is no problem. Ha be'sida, ha be'avna. It depends. If we're talking about a notch on any of the stones of the mizbeach have got to be smooth. And therefore, if even your fingernail will get stuck on a little notch on the stone, that is too big of a notch. However, in terms of the lime that is holding the stones together, that the stones are kind of placed into for structure, if any of the lime gets a notch or some kind of break, so then we're talking about the size of, it was a machlokes, either a kazayas or a tefach, but larger than, when we're talking about the lime, it can be larger than a simple nick. Okay. Give all the Gomer of Huna says of Huna, Tabacha de lo sar sakino kami chochem, mishamtinon le. Okay, here we go. So says Rav Huna that a shaychit who does not show his knife to a chochem. We had discussed this yesterday. We discussed this on Daf Yud, that maybe even Daf Tes also, I don't remember, that you show the knife to a chacham to have a look at the knife to make sure that it is a kosher knife. And if one does not do it, if you have a shaychit who doesn't show his knife to a chacham, mishamtinan le, we excommunicate that shaychit. V'Rava Amar says, Rava, not only that, we go one step further, me'abrina, even two steps further, me'abrinan le, machrizinan abistre detrefei. Says Rava, not only do we excommunicate him, or we'll get to the not only in a second. Says Rava, we fire him from his job. He can no longer, we won't trust his Shechitah anymore. He won't be able to be the local shochet anymore. And we announce Mechazinan Abisrei Detrefei, and we announce about his Shechitah, about all of his meat. It's all treif. Don't, if you walk into Shlomi the butcher, anything you see, it's all treif. It's all treif. V'lo plige, they don't argue. Kam bisha nimtze sakino yofe, kam bisha nimtze sakino yofe. And Rava and Rafuna don't argue. They're just talking about two different scenarios. If the shaychit, Shlomi the shaychit, does not show his knife to the chacham, to the Rav, so he's in trouble. If we then say, hey, Shlomi the shaychit, show us your knife, and it's kosher, so we say, okay, fine. At least it's kosher. So we excommunicate him, but we don't fire him from his job. We don't announce that all of his meat is treif. we just excommunicate him, and I guess eventually hopefully he'll do tshuva and we'll lift the excommunication, and he can continue being shleimi the shaychit. But if he didn't show his knife to the Rav, and we check the knife and it's possible, now he's really in trouble. Not only do we excommunicate him, we also fire him from his job, and we say that any meat shechted by shleimi the shaychit is treif. Now Ravina takes it a step further. Ravina Amar says, Ravina, heichad lo nimtze sakino yofe mimasmeis le befarta dafilu v'kachov nami lo mizdabin. Says Ravina, look, all the above, excommunication, firing him, saying that all his meat is treif, that's actually if the knife turns out to be kosher. All of those things happen, even if the knife is kosher. Says Ravina, I'm going to read it again. When the knife is found to be possible, so he didn't show the knife, and he's shechting, and it turns out his knife is possible, and here he is shechting meat for the community, not showing his knife to anybody. Turns out he's shechting with a possible knife. So says Ravina, not only do we do all the things above in that case, but also mimas misle befarta, we take all of his meat and we cover it in excrement. Even the Ovdei Kuchavim won't want to buy it. The first way we said that we'll announce that his meat is treif. So okay, fine. So Yidden won't be able to buy it because it's treif, but at least he could sell it to Ovdei Kuchavim, people who can eat treif. But if they take it and throw it into excrement, so then even the Ovdei Kuchavim don't want to eat that. Excuse me. There was a shaychit There was a shaychit who didn't show his knife to Rave bar Chinino. Shamte, Rave bar Chinino excommunicated him, and he fired him from his job. He can't be the community shaychit anymore. The Achriz Abisrei Ditrefai, and Rav bar Chinina announced that any of Shleimi the Shaychit's meat is treif. Iklumar Zutra of Rav Ashi Legabe, Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi came to visit Rav bar Chinina. Amalu, and Rav bar Chinina felt a little bad. He felt maybe he was a little bit heavy-handed there. Let's go weiter. Amalu le'ainu Rabbanon b'milsei. Nu Rav Ashi and Mar Zutra, maybe go check. Can you check in for me on Shlomi the Shaychit? He didn't show his knife to me, and I was pretty heavy-handed. I excommunicated him, fired him from his job, announced that all his meat is treif. Pretty heavy-handed. The Talu Beit Tifle, he's got mouths to, he's got children to feed. I feel a little bad. He's got children to feed. Bodka Rav Ashi l'sakenu matzo yofet. Rav Ashi checked Shlomi the Shaychit's knives, and they were kosher knives. Ve'achsherei, and Rav Ashi said, Shlomi the Shaychit, okay, you can continue being Shlomi the Shaychit. Omer lei Mar Zutra, says Mar Zutra to Rav Ashi, velo leichush mar l'sava, but don't you need to check in with Rav bar Chinina, before you just reinstate Shlomi the Shaychit? Omer lei shlichusei ko avdinon. Rav Ashi says, after all, Rav bar Chinina sent us to check, to follow up on Shlomi the Shaychit. Clearly, we can assume that Rav bar Chinina also gave us the leeway or whatever, the authority to be able to also reinstate him if we find him to be trustworthy and a good guy. Shlomi the Shaychit is a good guy, and therefore we will reinstate his Shechitah license and allow him to shecht and support his family. Amar Rabba bar Huna, says Rabba bar Huna, Shein Tlusha Vitziporin Tlusha, if you have teeth that have been separated from an animal, or did Rashi even say from people? Interesting. So if you have a set of teeth that has been pulled out of a person or out of an animal, Vitziporin Tlusha, or fingernail that's been separated from a animal. So I think in both cases, the teeth are still in like the jaw, but like the whole jaw has been pulled out of the person or the animal, or the hand or something from an animal has been separated from the animal. Mutar lishchot ba, you can slaughter with it lechatchila. But our Mishnah had said you're not allowed to slaughter with a harvesting sickle, nor with a saw, nor with teeth, nor with fingernails, because they strangle. Shein ashein lo kasha. In terms of the teeth, it's not a problem. Ha bechada ha b'taite. It depends. If it's just one tooth, then it's fine. It's like one blade essentially. If it's two teeth, well then it's like serrated, and that's going to be problematic. Tziporin, not tziporin lo kasha, and the fingernail thing is also not a problem. If it's still connected to the animal, and you like take the animal and basically scratch the neck open, that is a problem. But if the hand of the animal has already been severed from the animal, and now you just want to use its sharp claw to shecht with, that could be okay. And now we get up to a new Mishnah, slaughtering with a sickle. Shechitah v'magel kotzir, somebody who slaughters with a harvesting sickle. People are coming into the house. I think it's gonna get noisy. Ma, I'm recording. Thanks. Where are we? Hashachib mago kotzer. Somebody who slaughters with a harvesting sickle. So b'derech halichosa, okay, if it's like going forward, Beishamai poslin, Beishamai say nonetheless it's possible, Vesil machshirin, Beisil say kosher, V'mechliku shinea harei hi besakin, and if you kind of smooth it out, so then it's basically just a knife. Let's take a look at some pictures for a second. First, let's look at a sickle, just to get on the same page about what a sickle is. So here we're looking at a sickle with a smooth blade. So this is not the serrated blade that we're talking about. We'll get to that in a second. This is best in just what a sickle looks like. Use it for like harvesting and stuff. Now, here what I have is a knife, not a sickle, but a knife that it's like a hand sickle. What I've done is I've created a knife that has like some jagged edges there, and this is the kind of what we're talking about. So like these jagged edges, if you were to move this knife kind of like to the left, if you would like move forward with the knife, so there wouldn't be like any tearing, because it would just kind of essentially just like it's all moving in the same kind of direction, and we just kind of cut. Now, if you go back with it, well, then it's going to like tear the heck out of whatever you're tearing. But as long as you're moving front, which is what the Mishnah is saying, right? If it's a holacha, so let's actually take a look at the Mishnah again, right? So if you have, so if you have this sickle, like we saw a sickle a second ago. Now, if instead, however, of the blade being smooth, it is jagged, like we see in this knife that I made here with those jagged edges. But if you move forward with it, right? So we say, b'derech halichasa, as long as you're moving forward with it, you're not. It's all just going to be kind of a smooth ride. Beishamai poslin, nonetheless, Beishamai says posel v'sil machshirin. Beisil say that it is kosher. V'imechliku shinel. Now, if you smoothed out all of the edges, so that then it's kind of looking like this sickle that we have here, the sickle with the smooth blade, well, then essentially, as the Mishnah says, where are we? Arei he kisakin. It's be'etzem, just a knife at that point, and it's completely fine. Givaldik, says the Gemara, Amr B'chir Bar Abba, Amr Reb Yochanan. Akshech shiru beisila lochshu ela l'tayra midei nevela avabachila asura. It says Reb Yochanan that we saw in our Mishnah machlekes b'shamim beisila when it comes to using the sickle. We saw machlekes b'shamim and beisila when it comes to using the sickle. Beis Shammai said that even though you're moving forward with it and everything would be smooth, it's nonetheless possible. The Beis Hillel said it's kosher. Rabbi Yochanan says when Beis Hillel says it's kosher, it's not to say that you can eat the shechitah. You can't. But it's not nevela, and that's a big deal. It's not nevela. If it was nevela is an avatuma. It would be tummy, you have to go to the mikveh. This is not nevela. So Beis Hillel is only saying that it's kosher in that it is not nevela. You can't eat it though. Let's read that again. Even when Beis Hillel says kosher, Lo echshiru el l'tayra midenevela. It means that it is tahor. It won't be nevela. It's not an avatuma. It's tahor. However, avabachila asura. You can't eat the shechita with the serrated sickle. Amr Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, daika nami dikatani. Now Rav Ashi wants to try and bring a raya from our Mishnah that the Mishnah says beishamit poslin vesel machshirin v'lo katani beishamit osun vesel matirin. The Mishnah does not say that Beis Hillel matirin. That Beis Hillel says that it's mutter. It doesn't. It says Beis Hillel machshirin. It's kosher, but it is not mutter. The Gemara isn't super impressed with that. But why not? If we're talking about Tumah and Tara, that right? If it's like we're saying that, well, it's really just about Tumah and Tara. Well, then why not just say Beis Shammai mitamin, Beis Hillel mitarin? But ela postlin umachshirin v'osin umatirin chada milsahi. Tomato, potato. That postlin, machshirin, osrin, matirin. You can't really bring a raya to say that. The same thing, and therefore Rav Ashi's raya to try to, as Rashi points out, Rav Ashi's raya to try to bring a raya from our Mishnah to say our Mishnah is also talking about dafka kosher in that it's not nevela, but you can't eat it. The raya kind of fails, but Rashi points out Rabbi Yochanan's Misora, Rabbi Yochanan's halacha, Rabbi Yochanan's tradition that he has from his Rabbein back, I imagine back to Moshe Rabbeinu, that stands. Rabbi Yochanan said you can't eat it. That stands. Rav Ashi tried to bring a raya from our Mishnah, that failed. That failed. But the principle still remains, still stands that it isn't available, you can't eat it. Okay, and now we get to the next Mishnah, the last Mishnah of today's daf, and our next Mishnah, where we will be discussing the location for the Mishnah, the Gemara will be discussing the location for Shechitah, and particularly in the context of the trachea, and the Hagrama. What happens when you go beyond the scope of what is allowed, beyond the area that is permitted for Shechitah. Here we go. It says the Mishnah, Hashoiket b'toichat habas. Ooh. Okay. Somebody who slaughters from within the tabas. What's the tabas? The tabas hagedoila. Okay. We will see everything. Don't you worry. V'shir ba milo achut al pnei kula. As long as hair's breadth remains, meaning you stay within the boundaries of where you're allowed to be. So Shechitah suksher, it's a kosher Shechitah. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer says Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda meloi chut al pinei ruba says Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. You just need it to be a majority. You don't have to have it the whole way. All right, let us look at some stuff. Just a warning. There's going to be some kind of. We're looking at the inner workings of the animal. So, FYI, we're going to be looking at some. Bloody, meaty, raw, shechita kind of stuff. Okay, here we go. So here is, we got a few slides here. As the header of the slide says, a macro view of the trachea. Okay, so this is like the face of a sheep that's like opened up, as well as its neck is like torn open for us. And we get to look inside. So where the white arrow is pointing to, it's pointing to a label that says kaneh. Kaneh is the trachea, the windpipe. And you could see, that kind of white, kind of wide windpipe. You can also see, we're gonna get different angles of this. This is what I call the macro view, kind of like a little bit more of a zoomed out view than we're gonna see. So here you can kind of see the trachea going kind of up the neck. Where it ends, I don't have any arrows there because we'll see other angles on it. But so that's kind of the trachea. So coming in from the right where the arrow is pointing, if you kind of follow in the same direction as the arrow is going, so it goes all the way up until where kind of the trachea kind of ends, and there's that kind of cover on it. That cover is called the kova, and also kind of right where the cover and the trachea meet, there's something that's called the tabas hagadola. So you could see kind of already on the trachea, there's like all these rings. Those are called tabaot, rings. And the topmost ring is called the Tabat HaGedola. Let's look at the next slide. A labeled view of the trachea. So this is more of a zoomed in view and much more labeled view than we were just looking at a minute ago. So what are we looking at here? So if we move from right to left, so the white arrow all the way to the right is pointing to a label that says Tabaot HaKaneh, and that's all those rings. Now there's a lot more rings that go beyond what's in this photo, but you can see that those are kind of rings in the trachea, that these kind of rings go, and those rings will go ring after ring after ring, all the way down to the lungs, Moving to the left, the blue arrow points to a label that says Hatabaat HaGedola. That is the big ring that we're talking about. What's unique about the big ring, other than it being the topmost ring, is that it goes all around the trachea. It entirely covers the trachea. You see, let's actually hop over to this slide for a second. Horseshoe rings. You can see in this slide, right, this is kind of an inner look at the rings of the trachea. They're actually like horseshoes. They don't go all the way around, right? They're more like horseshoes, and then at the bottom, at the opening of the horseshoe, there's like some meat or cartilage or something that kind of closes it up. But the actual, with the exception of the Tabat HaGedola, all the other tabaot, all of the other rings are kind of horseshoe shaped. They're not a full ring. So now going back to our labeled view of the trachea. So yes, you have that Tabat HaGedola at the top of the trachea, and that actually goes all the way around the trachea. And for now, let's assume that that is the location for the Shechitah. That, our Mishnah, when we just read Hashochet mitoch HaTabat, we're talking about the Tabat HaGedola. That's where you gotta get. Okay, we'll get to V'shir Lo in a second. But that Tabat HaGedola, that's the bullseye for the Shechitah. Imagine you probably have to be a professional. I mean, you got to get mamish. That's what you got to cut. Next, moving to the left, we got a red arrow pointing to a label that says Shipui Kova. Let's actually move one more to the left for a second. We have a golden arrow pointing to a label that says Kova. That whole section, really, right past the Tabas HaGedola, that's all the Kova, which I think translates to like a helmet. I think translates to helmet. And if you notice the red arrow, the gold arrow, and then the dark green arrow to the left of that, all of those labels are Kova related labels, right? Shipui Kova, Chuda de Kova, right? So basically that whole section above the Tabas HaGedola is what's called the Kova. Okay. Now, what else can I tell you? We're good. Maybe that's all I need to show you for now on this. There's gonna be a lot to see here. I have to imagine we're gonna pull this up again. Next, here's one more view, a graphic view of the trachea. So once again, if we go from left to right, the label on the left is the kaneh. That is the trachea coming all up. You can see all the rings on it. Then the next label is the Tabas HaGedola. It's a little bloody. And you could, that kind of is kind of at the top of the trachea going all the way around. And then the next label is that Kova that we're talking about. Where that label is pointing to, there's an arrow pointing. That's actually, as we saw in the previous slide, there's something called the Shipui Kova. That's going to be important because Lemaisa actually, La'alacha, we said, La'alacha essentially we say, I'll give things away. I'll give things away for now. La'alacha, I mean, I didn't look up the halacha in your day, but the Rambam said this seems to be the consensus. And the Gemara we're going to end off with the Gemara saying this at the end of the daf. I realized I didn't get as far as I thought I would get. We'll see. It might be easy to do that next little bit. Anyways, fine. From where that arrow is pointing, that Kova arrow, that's actually the Shipui Kova. Was it Shipui Kova? Shipui Kova. So you can basically slice anywhere from there and down. Right, anywhere above there is too high, but anywhere below there is okay for the slice. But again, as I mentioned a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, really right now we're really focusing on the Tabat HaGedola. Really, right now we're focusing on the Tabat HaGedola. For now, we're assuming that that's where the slice needs to be. Okay. now that we have seen a lot, I hope everyone's okay with these photos. Let us have another look at this Mishnah. I imagine we're probably going to be toggling between the photos back and forth a whole bunch. Says the Mishnah, Hashaychim mitorch atabas. So somebody who slaughters the tabas agadola. So I will. What should I use? Which photo should I pull up? Maybe let's pull up the graphic view of the trachea. So you want to slice in that tabas gadola. That's the middle label there, right? You want to. It's pointing to that real bloody area. So that middle label. So you want to get that. It's that top ring. That top ring that goes all the way around the trachea. You want the slice to be entirely in the tabas gadola, not in the kane, and not in the, or really particularly. Look, Lamaisi, we don't paskin this way, so like to kind of get into the details of what yes and what no, but at least we can say at least this. At least we could say this. You don't want it to be in the kova, okay? You're going to want to make sure that the slice is entirely in the tabas agadola. It doesn't veer off above the tabas agadola into the kova. You don't want that, okay? So somebody who's slaughtering in a tabas agadola, v'shir ba miloachut, and as long as the entire slice remains in the tabas gadola, even if you're getting real close to the kova, but you have a hair's breadth between the slice and the kova, all good. Al pnei kula, throughout the entire slice, shechitah so kshera, it is a kosher shechitah. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda milochut al pnei ruba. Okay, whereas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, look, all you need is a majority. As long as the majority of the slice is in the tabas hagedola, then it's good. If after a majority it kind of veers off into the kova, it's okay because you already have a majority of the slice that is good. Okay, so that's the machlokes between the Chacham and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. That the Chacham say that the entire slice needs to be in the tabas hagedola, and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says a majority of the slice, right? Well, really. Meaning, if we're assuming that you're slicing through the entirety of the trachea, so a majority of the slice, meaning you have to slice through a majority of the trachea inside the tabas hagedola. Once you've gone more than a majority, if it veers off into the kova, according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, it is okay. Okay, I'm gonna take a shluck of coffee of tea, and we'll go weiter. Now, says the Gemara. Rav and Shmuel say, halacha Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that as long as the majority of the slice is in the tabas hagedola, it's kosher. Now, just to point out something that we mentioned earlier, we're right now talking about where the location of shechita, right, which we're right now assuming is in the tabas hagedola, as we're going to actually see explicitly in a second. But also we're discussing the psul of hagrama, right? So when the chacham say that you need the slice to be entirely in the tabas hagedola, and if it veers off to the kova, it's possible because that would be the psul of hagrama. Okay, and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that you at least need the majority to be on the trachea. If you have less than majority on the tabas hagedola, if you have less than majority, so then he would also say then it would be hagrama. Now, again, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Shmuel say, Halacha Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that you need just the majority, you don't need the whole slice. The Af Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, now say Rav and Shmuel, that even Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda lo Amar ela b'tabas hagedola. He's saying that you have to slice in the tabas hagedola, that topmost ring. Hoyil makefes es kol akone, as we saw earlier, because it goes around, it encircles the entire trachea. But b'shar tabos lo. With the other rings, however, as we saw earlier, that they're more horseshoe shaped. They don't encircle the entire trachea. Well, those you wouldn't slice into those rings. You can't slice into the other rings according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. V'asanya Brulin and Abraisa. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, Ashoichet b'shar tabaos, somebody who slices into the other rings, af al pisha ein makifos is called akona, even though they don't surround the entire trachea. They're horseshoe shaped, as we saw earlier. But they do surround most of the trachea, and therefore, because they surround most of the trachea, we'll say also rubo kakulo, and that is sufficient. What does Rashi say? La milsa nami amina rubo kakula. Exactly, as Rashi says. And so since the rings for the rest of the trachea surround most of the trachea, that is sufficient. And this is very important. So says the Brisa that according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, you can slaughter anywhere from the tabas agadola and down. Okay, so if we go back to if we go back to the macro view of the trachea, you could obviously zoom out a lot more, but basically anywhere from the tabas agadola, which would be at the top of the trachea, and anywhere down from there, that's all a kosher range for shechita. Okay, so according to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, it does not have to be limited to the tabas agadola. And then continues the brayso mugremes psula. This is the shita. This is a separate shita. The shita of the chacham. The chacham say that mugremes, if it veers off at all, if it veers off to the kova, if it veers off to the other tabaos, it is psula. You got to get it in the tabas gedola. Heyid, right? That's what Rashi says. Right? Mugremes afilu ruba besoch ataba dabas muta lemala mitabas gedola. Okay, so Rashi Davka says lemala mitabas gedola. Okay, fine. What would he say about the other tabaos? I don't know, I assume according to this sheet of the Chachamim, and again, we don't paskin like this, so it's a little bit hard to say exactly what it's, but certainly if it goes off to the kova, it's going to be a problem, and, even just a little bit, I assume according to the sheet, it also means the other tabos as well. Now, here, this is crucial. Heyed Rab Chanina ben Antigonus al mugremes sheik shera. Now, Heyid Rab Chanina ben Antigonus, as Rashi points out, when it says Heyid, that Rab Chanina ben Antigonus testified, that means if he's testifying that this is what you're allowed to do, then this is what we do. So this is the halacha. So Rab Chanina ben Antigonus testified al mugremes that whatever we're talking about agrama right now, i.e. we've been saying that you do the shechita in the tabas gedola, and if it veers off into the kova, it is pasul. Says Rab Chanina ben Antigonus, that's kosher. That is kosher. And as I pointed out earlier, if we look at the what should we look at? Let's look at the shipoi kova in the labeled view of the trachea. So that red arrow, the pink arrow pointing to the shipoi kova, says Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, anywhere from the kova. So even if it's beyond, the blue arrow to the right is a tabas gedola. Even if it's entirely beyond the tabas gedola, what both Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda and the Chacham would consider hagrama, says Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, from the shipoi kova, from that pink arrow downwards towards anywhere from there and down towards the lungs, is all fair game, is all kosher. So says Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus that what both Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda and the Chacham would consider to be agrama, i.e. above the tabas gedola, says Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus that that's fine as long as it's from the shipoi kova and downwards. And we're gonna talk more about this later. It is a kosher shechita, and we're gonna see that we paskin that way. Okay. So essentially, so basically from there down, it's not from the shipoi kova and down towards the lungs, all down the trachea, all of that is fair game for shechita according to Reb Chanina ben Antigonus. And as Rashi points out, because it says Hey Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, he testified about this, so we're actually going to paskin like Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, and we are going to see that later on this daf as well. So now, back to the question. Rav and Shmuel had said that we paskin like Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, in that we go based on the majority, that the majority needs to be, as long as the majority is in the tabas hagedola, it will be a kosher shechita. Even if after that it veered off into the kova. However, they said that this is specifically for the tabas hagedola. Rav and Shmuel had said, right? What did they say? They said, "Va'af Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda lo Amar ela b'tabas hagedola hol makavis is kol hakone aval b'shar tabos lo." Rav and Shmuel had said that according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, you need just the majority of the slice, but only it's limited in scope to the tabas hagedola. You can't slice any of the other tabaot because they don't fully encircle the trachea. But we had seen a brisa where Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is pretty explicit that you can even slice the other tabaot. Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda Taite Ka'amar, that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda said two distinct halachas. One being that once you slice through a majority of the trachea, even if you veer off after that, it's still kosher since you have the rove. And the other thing that he said is that you can slice anywhere, right, through any of the rings, whether the tabas hagedola or any of the other rings. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda said you could slice through those as well. Rabbi Shmuel Sabre Kavasi Bechado Fligale Bechado. Rav and Shmuel, they agree with Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda with one regard, but not with another. They agree with Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. They accept his opinion that once you've slaughtered a majority of the trachea, it's already kosher, even if it veers off after that. They don't, however, accept that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that when Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that you can slaughter you could slice through any of the rings, they don't accept that. They say it has to be the tabas hagedola. V'ha lo amar kamri, but one second. If you look at what Rav and Shmuel said, they said, V'af Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda lo amar ella. Rav and Shmuel, if you look at what they said, it looks like they're coming to explain what Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda's opinion is. That when Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that all you need to slice through is a majority, and they say, but still, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, when he says that, it's limited in scope to the tabas hagedola. It sounds like they're not saying Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says two things and we accept one of them. They're saying, no, he says one thing and this is what it is. So this is how you have to understand what they're saying. Halacha kimoso b'tabas hagedola, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda with regard to the tabas hagedola, that once you have a majority of the shechita in the tabas hagedola, so then it's kosher. Ve'en halacha kimoso b'shar tabos. But they say, however, that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda when it comes to the other tabaot. That they would say you can't slaughter in the other rings, in the other tabaot. It's limited to the tabas hagedola, but they do agree with Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda that once you slice more than halfway through, the shechita is kosher, even if you veer off after that. Kisalik Reb Zera, when Reb Zera made aliyah from Babble to Eretz Yisrael, Achal mugremis d'Rav Shmuel, he ate shechita from animals that were slaughtered from the other rings. That which Rav and Shmuel would consider to be nevela, right? They say that Rav and Shmuel had said that you have to slaughter within the tabas hagedola. And here was Reb Zera moving to Eretz Yisrael and eating shechita from the other tabos. Amrle, they said to him, Lab me aser Rav Shmuel at, don't you come from Babble? Don't you come from the land of Rav and Shmuel? Why are you eating this meat? Shouldn't you consider it to be nevela? Amar Lu, he says to them, Man Amra, who's the one who alleges that is Rav and Shmuel's opinion? That they agree with Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda with regard to the majority of the slice having to be a rove in the tabas, but they disagree, right? They said, but Rav and Shmuel say, Rav Yosef explained that Rav and Shmuel say that the other rings are out of bounds. Man Amar Rav Yosef Bar Chia, that was Rav Yosef. Yosef Bar Chia mikuli alma gamir. However, Rav Yosef Bar Chia, as Rashi explains, Rav Yosef hears lots of stuff from lots of people, and maybe not everybody who he hears things from are super accurate. Maybe they're making a mistake. Shamar Rav Yosef Ikpid. Rav Yosef heard that this is what Reb Zera had said about him and his reputation. Omar and Rav Yosef got upset because he says that's totally the opposite of the truth. Mikuli Alma Gamirna, I will just learn anything from anybody? Far from it. Ana Merav Yehuda Gamirna, I'm a Talmud of Rav Yehuda. The Afilu Speke de Gavrigaris, and my Rebbe Rav Yehuda, who I've been trained by and in whose steps I follow, Rav Yehuda would even mention the suffix of people, meaning, for example, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba, says Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba, suffix Mishmei de Rav, suffix Mishmei de Shmuel, that Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba reported to him, it was unclear if Rav said it or Shmuel said it, meaning, Rav Yehuda was so makbid that if somebody, in this case Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba, came before him and told Rav Yehuda halacha, and Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba said, I'm not sure if this was from Rav or if this was from Shmuel, when Rav Yehuda was repeating it, he would say, this is something I heard from Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba, and we're not sure if it's from Rav or Shmuel. He was so makbid to quote everybody, and if there was an uncertainty, he would be clear about what the uncertainty was. And here you are just saying that I listen to anything from anybody, and maybe I'm not so makbid on making sure that everything is super accurate, and I might have something that's inaccurate slip into my halachis. That's insulting. So again, the Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba, Safek Mishmei de Rav, Safek Mishmei de Shmuel, Shloisha Matirin es HaBechor. This is a random example that we see that he was quoting whether this was a Safek, whether this was from Rav or from Shmuel. The following halacha, Shloisha Matirin es HaBechor, B'Makom Shein Mumche. That when it comes to a Bechor, that we're going to learn about Masechta Bechoros, if it has a mum, so then it doesn't need to be offered as a korban. The kohen can eat it. So, but to be matir, right, yatir bechor, to be matir bechor, it's a type of smicha, right? There's yora, yadin, yatir bechoris, right? As we learned about Masechta Sanhedrin. So where there's no mumches, so then 3 ajotas can be matir bechor in some cases. So Rav Yosef got a little bit insulted. Okay, he says, is that really what Reb Zera is saying about me? That I'm not makbid, and that I might just hear something that's inaccurate and say that over as a halacha? It says Rav Yosef, I'm a little bit insulted because I'm a Talmud of Rav Yehuda, and in our tradition we are extremely meticulous. Fine. Reb Zera leislei nosnin olab. Still, we don't understand. How could it be that Reb Zera was eating this shechitah of animals that were slaughtered from the other rings? The fact of the matter is that in Babble, they're makbid for the ruling of Rav and Shmuel that they only eat shechitah from the tabas agadola. So how could it be that Reb Zera comes to Eretz Yisrael, all of a sudden he's eating shechitah from the other tabos? Doesn't he hold of the concept that when a person travels from one place to another place, so he has to accept upon himself the stringencies of both places? So therefore, even though he's in Eretz Yisrael, he should still be makbid for the chumras of Babble. Amar Abai says, Abai, Nemile mi Babble le Babble, Eretz Yisrael le Eretz Yisrael. That's if you're going from one location in Babble to another location in Babble, so then you accept upon yourself the chumras of both places, or from one place in Eretz Yisrael to another place in Eretz Yisrael. However, Inam Eretz Yisrael Babel, or even from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, still keep the chumras of Eretz Yisrael. Avol mi Babel Eretz Yisrael, but when traveling from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, like Reb Zera was, Kevin the Anan Kaifinanu, since we are, what's the way to say that? Like Kaifinan literally means bent over to them. Since we bend over before them, They are like kind of higher than we are. They're like kind of on a higher level than we are. We bend over to them. Avdinan kavasayu, so we do like them. And that explains, so says Abai, that explains why Reb Zer, even though yes, normally we would say take on the chumras of both places, but when going from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, of course you could do like they do in Eretz Yisrael. After all, we are kind of almost maybe like dependent on them. Maybe you could say, Rashi says, right, we rely on the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, Kiddush HaChodesh. They have to do Kiddush HaChodesh, Ibur Shana and leap years and stuff. Tosfos points out an interesting shaila, which is that on Daf Hey of Masechta Sanhedrin, we actually say the opposite. That if a person has, if a person has permission to judge Dinei Mominis in Bavel, so then if they make a mistake, then they'll be Patur Milasham, they don't have to pay. And that's even if they go from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara asks, what if somebody had permission to judge in Eretz Yisrael? So then would that permission work in Bavel? Right? The assumption is that that Bavel was actually the stronger authority than Eretz Yisrael. So Tosfos gives an interesting answer. I'll read it to you quickly. That when it comes to Isser v'Heter, so Bnei Eretz Yisrael are on the higher level. So Isser v'Heter, such as kosher meat or whatever, so Eretz Yisrael is on the higher level. When it comes to Dinei Mominis, so the Reish Galusa has more authority to kind of, take money away and give money to whatever. So therefore, the Gemara in Sanhedrin was asking about Dinei Mominis, right? Dinei Mominis B'Shlosha, first parak of Masechta Sanhedrin. So Sanhedrin, they were talking about Mominis, so therefore they said that the assumption was that Bavel, right, if you have permission to judge in Bavel, so then certainly that carries over to Eretz Yisrael. There was a shaila about Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. However, over here, when we're talking about Isser v'Heter, when we're talking about kosher Shechitah, so we say that, so says Abaye, Reb Zer would certainly be able to rely upon the Isser v'Heter in Eretz Yisrael. Now, Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, afilu tema mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael. It says Rav Ashi, even if you want to say that from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, you still take on the chumras of Bavel as well. However, that's only if you're planning to go back to Bavel. So then you still have to keep the stringencies on Bavel. But if you moved to Eretz Yisrael, Reb Zera ein daitul achzor av. Reb Zera moved to Eretz Yisrael. He was not planning on coming back to Bavel, and for that reason, he can rely upon, right? So the concept of the chumras of both places don't apply anymore if you're planning to go to Eretz Yisrael and to stay there. Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, fine. So Givaldik. So Reb Zer went to Eretz Yisrael and he was eating from the Shechitah from these rings. Okay, fine. I think maybe let us continue. Cheva, what should we do? Should we go weiter? We're going to go weiter. Should we go weiter or should we kind of check in somewhat? I feel like no, maybe we're not going to check in. Let's just push through a bit more and we'll make some seder at the end. But so far, just like on a very high level, what have we talked about so far? We've talked about the Tabas HaGedola. We've discussed, does the Shechitah have to be limited to the Tabas HaGedola? Right? Rav and Shmuel want to say, yes, it is limited to the Tabas HaGedola. It can't veer into the Kova. Right? They paskin like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says it can't veer into the Kova. They also say it can't veer into the other Tabos either. Imamish needs to be in the Tabas HaGedola entirely. However, they do paskin like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, who says that once you slice through more than half, well then it's kosher. Even if at that point it veers off to somewhere else, then it's okay. Now, we also had seen the opinion earlier of Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, who had said that actually, even if you go up into the kova, as long as it's from the shipui kova and downwards, that is also okay. And then, of course, we saw opinions who say, we saw an opinion of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, and in Eretz Yisrael they seem to do this way, that it's not limited to the Tabas Gedola, but also all of the other Tabas also. So we see that there's different opinions over here with regard to the different sort of scopes of what's allowed for Shechitah. Now, Amalei Abaye, the Rav Yosef, says Abaye to Rav Yosef, When the rabbis came from Machoza, Amrei, skip the next few words, Mishmei de Rab Nachman, in the name of Rab Nachman, Mugremes Kishera. So they said that Mugremes is Kishera, that, Rav and Shmuel had said that all the other tabaot are off limits. That's Hagrama. But apparently, all these people came from Machoza, and they said in the name of Rab Nachman that the other rings are kosher. How could this be? Amar Lei, so Rav Yosef says, Naira ufashte. Every river goes in its own directions, and that's all good. Every place has its own minags, whatever the minag is where you are. If the minag in the place where you are is to be makpid and to paskin like Rav and to hold like Rav and Shmuel, that Shechitah is limited to the tabas hagedola, and anywhere in the kova and anywhere on the other tabaot is hagrama, well then, that's what you do in that place. If you are in a place where all of the other tabaot are A-OK, so then that's what you do there. Depends on the minhag of the place where you are. The traditions of the place where you are. Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Achsher bechuda de kova'a. So Reb Shimon ben Lakish has the most far-reaching, kind of the biggest chiddush here. Rish Lakish has the big chiddush here when it comes to the scope, the range of Shechitah. Here, let's look at the labeled view of the trachea. The furthest most arrow, the dark green arrow all the way to the left that points to the label that says Chuda de Kova'a, that's mamish. If you take a look at, what do I want to show you? Let's take a look at the macro view of the trachea. So the white arrow is pointing leftwards up the trachea. Mamish, all the way to when you get to the top of the trachea, there's that helmet that's covering. All the way to the tip of that covering of the trachea. It's almost like a pen. It's almost like it's like the tip of a pen almost. What is this called? The chuda, right? The point of the kova, right? So it's almost as if it's like a pen. That would be like the point where you write with. So that would be, according to Rish Lakish, you can even slaughter it there. That's in under the chin already of the animal. But anyways, Rish Lakish says you can get all the way up to the tip of the kova. Now, so Reb Shimon ben Lakish achsher bechuda de kova, by the tip of the kova. Kari Allah Reb Yochanan says gisa gas is big. It's too much. That's too big of it. That's too far. Amr Papi Mishmei Rava says a Papi named Rava Poga bechite treifa. So a Papi the name of Rava that Poga bechite treifa. Let's go by there for a second. Ibayu they ask the kasha Poga vinoga boen. Does Poga mean that you actually sliced into the chite? The pasuk says that Shlomo HaMelech, when he first became king, he instructed Benayahu ben Yehoyada to kill Adoniyahu ben Chagis. Right, Adoniyahu ben Chagis had initially attempted to usurp the kingship, and he ultimately paid with it by his life. And with his life, it says Vayivka bo vayamos that Benayahu ben Yehoyada Yifka bod, he pagad Adoniyahu, he hit him and obviously made contact, Vayamos, and Adoniyahu died. Odilma paga velo naga, or maybe he kind of arrived at but didn't actually touch physically. Kedechsiv vayifgu bo malochi elokim. It says at the end of Parshas Vayetze that Yaakov Avinu, when he was coming back to Eretz Yisrael, it says that he encountered malachim. They didn't necessarily touch each other, but they were right next to each other. So that's the shaila. Now let's talk about the Shechitah for a second. Here is a slide with the Shechitah. Okay, so there is a circle. There's a pink circle in the middle of that slide, in the middle of this image of flesh. And actually in that circle, I removed the background which is why all you see is the flesh, but there are still two arrows from the original photo. They are pointing to these two chites. And they are these kind of I don't know, I guess like almost like wheat berry looking things. Now, and this is at the top of the trachea. So there are these two chitae at the top of the trachea, and they're in the circle, that pink circle, and there's a pink arrow there up to the right. That pink arrow is pointing to the kova. Okay, basically these chitae are in the kova. Okay, so if we go back to what should we look at? Okay, let's take a look at the graphic view of the trachea. So basically you have the kana on the right, you have the kana, which is the leftmost label. So you have the trachea coming in from the left. So when you get to the top of the trachea, and you get to the kova, which is the rightmost label. So in the kova there are these chitae. Let's pull that out again. Okay, here are these chitae. So that's in the kova. So now the point is, if you slice below the chitae, so you're good, right? Assuming that you can basically slice anywhere from the, if we assume right now, this is kind of part of our question, is how high is too high? Okay, so, well, let's assume right now that you're allowed to slaughter in all the rest of the rings. Not like Rav and Shmuel. Let's assume that you're allowed to slaughter on like Rav Nachman was saying, on the rest of the rings. So long as you've sliced below the chitae, which means that you've sliced below the kova, which is essentially means that you're slicing from the tabasa gadola and down, so that's going to be a good kosher shechita. What if you slice in the chitae, which means that you're slicing into the kova? Okay, now if you slice above the chitae, so if you slice the trachea and you realize that the chitae are below your slice, that means you sliced too high. But as long as you slice into the chitae, that means that you're at least not above the shipui dekova. The shaila is, can you slaughter into the shipui dekova? Now, so again, if you slice and the chitae are above the slice, that means that you're below the kova. If you slice into the chitae, that means that you're slicing into the shipui, like the shipui dekova, right? And that's fine. Well, that's a shaila if it's fine. And if you realize that you sliced above the chitae, well then you're for sure too high. Now, where are we? So again, Amar a puppy says, Mishmei de Rava, in the name of Rava, Poga b'chitae treifa. If you are pogea the chitae, it's a treifa. Now, there's Rashi and Tosfos have different girsos here. I'm going to read this lefi Rashi. So, I want to know, Poga v'noga boen, does it mean that you sliced into the chitae? Like we saw by Benayo ben Yehoyada that he hit Adoniyo and killed him, made contact. Or Dilma Paga Velo Naga, maybe you didn't actually make contact. Maybe, as Rashi says, it's below the chitae. That Yaakov Avinu encountered Malachi Elokim, but didn't actually touch them per se. Itmar, it stated, Amar Papa says, Papa Mishmei de Rava, in the name of Ravit, Shier bechite kshera. Even if you cut into the chitae, as long as you're not above the chitae, but there's some of the chitae left above the slice, so then it's kosher. And that essentially is the shipui kova. Right? So you're cutting into the kova, but not above the chitae. Into the kova, but not above the chitae. And again, that's the shipui kova. Omar Ameimer bar Mar Yenuka Havokaim nekame der Rab Avia. I was before Rab Avia, but Omar Li, and he said to me, Shiur b'chitei kshera. Also, as long as some of the chitae remain, you're kosher, right? So even if you cut into the shipui kova, it's kosher, but not above that. Omar Ravina Rav Ashi, Omar Li Shemen misuvra. Ikla marzutra la'asrin v'darash shiur b'chitei kshera. Also, as long as, right, if you cut into the chitae, it is fine. Into the shipui kova, it is fine. Above it, it is not fine. My Rav Ashi Omar poga b'chitei kshera shiur b'chitei treifa. That if you are pogea b'chitei, it's kosher. I.e., if you get up to the chitae, if you are below the chitae, it is kishera. I.e., in the tabas agadola. Right, so even if you slice the tabas agadola right up to the chitae, it is fine. But if you slice into the chitae, Mar Bar Rashi says that is not fine. so he says that the shipoi kova is not okay. The hilchasa, the halacha is mishipoi kova ulamata. Here we go, friends. This is important. The halacha is mishipoi kova. It's like Reb Chanina ben Antigonus. If you cut into the shipoi kova ulamata and anywhere down the trachea to the lungs, he doesn't say to the lungs, but I'm saying that. I don't know if I saw it anywhere, but the Rambam says it. Ulamata kshera, and basically anywhere on the trachea from the shipoi kova and down is kshera. V'ainu deshir bechite, and this is what it means, right? That there are still chite left over, meaning above that would be above the shipoi kova, and that would be too high. But as long as you cut into the chite kova or the chite or anywhere below there, it is kosher. Rav Nachman achsher mishipoi kova lamata. Rav Nachman said that from the shipoi kova and downwards is kosher. Amalei Rav Chanan bar Rav Katina. The Rav Nachman says Rav Chanan bar Rav Katina to Rav Nachman. Kaman, who's it like? Lo Rabbanan v'lo Rabbi Yossi. This is like neither Rabbanan nor like Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda, right? Because both the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda had said that it's got to be at the Tabas HaGedolah. Even Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda, even if we say that according to Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda, it could be all the other tabos as well, but the highest you can go is the Tabas HaGedolah. Right? This is, of course, like Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, who said that you can even go further up to the Shipoi Kova. Omar Le, and says Rav Nachman to Rav Chanan bar Rav Katina, Anan lo chilik yadaina v'lo bilik yadaina. I don't know chilik, I don't know bilik. Ana shmaita yadaina, but I know the following halacha. Tam Rabchia bar Abba, Am Reb Yochanan v'Amila, Am Reb Abba bar Zabda, Am Reb Chanina v'Amila, Am Reb Yaakov bar Idi, Am Reb Yeshua ben Levi, Mishipoi Kova ulamata kshera. That from the Shipoi Kova and downwards is kosher. Like Rav Chanina ben Antigonus was saying, that from the Shipoi Kova and anywhere down the trachea, any of the area of the trachea, it is a kosher shechita. So friends, if there's one thing that you take away from this daf, lemaise, I didn't look at the Yoreh De'ah, but my impression is from learning this daf, and also I learned the next daf already, that from the Shipoi Kova, let's pull up this label, so we're looking at the same thing, the pink arrow here, the Shipoi Kova, and down the trachea, down to the lungs, anywhere in that range, if you slice through the trachea, we haven't gotten to the esophagus yet, I'm sure we'll have to discuss that, but if you slice through everything you got to slice through, that is going to be acceptable. Let me quickly look let me see, what does it say? Let's see, I had intended actually to go on a little bit further, but I forgot to review the next 5-6 lines. Let's see if I could get through it. If I'm breaking my teeth, we'll just hold it here and we'll start with this tomorrow. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Mugremes de Rabbanon, Kshera le Rabbi Yossi b'Rab Yehuda. Okay, so what the rabbis say is Hagrama, which is, right, they say that if you slice through a majority of the Tabas HaGedolah, but then after a majority you veer off into the Kova, they say it's possible, but that's Kshera le Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda says that is kosher, as long as you did a majority of the slice was in the Tabas HaGedolah. With Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda, Ksher Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus. Now what Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda would say is Hagrama, i.e. above the Tabas HaGedolah in the Kova, Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda would say that is Hagrama, but Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus would say it is kosher. Pshita, that is obvious. I mean, what's the chiddush here? I may have thought Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus adarabanan koi. I may have thought that Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus is specifically is commenting on the Rabbanon, that perhaps Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus was only coming to comment on the Rabbanon, that i.e. the Rabbanon said that if you slice a majority in the Tabas HaGedolah and then it veers off into the Kova, the Rabbanon said it's possible. Maybe Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, right? Because if you look at the Brisa, it says, right, if we look at the Brisa on the third line of Yud Ches Amud Beis, it says Mugremes Psula, and then Heid Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, etc. So maybe he was only commenting on that. So, right, but if you would slice entirely in the Kova, maybe you would say it's not okay. So Kamashmalan ve'ema, okay, so Kamashmalan that he is, so we're saying that no, Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus is saying even if you slice entirely in the Kova, as long as it is below the Shipoi Kova, it is acceptable. Maybe he is only commenting on the Rabbanon. Since he is in that brisa that we just mentioned right after the Chacham, then he could just say Heid Aleha, that he commented on the position of the rabbis, but it doesn't say that. The halacha is like Reb Chanina ben Antigonus because Rav Nachman paskins like him, and therefore, so long as you slaughter from the shipui kova down the trachea, in the tabao, any of the tabaos or anything, it is a kosher shechita. Wow, chevre, shkoyach for, I think this was a long, how long is this stuff? I think it's a long one. It is, sheesh, it's an hour 20. Wow, that's a long daf. Yeah, I didn't feel it was going to be long, but it's fascinating. Was this not a fascinating daf? Unbelievable. Okay, friends, so on daf Yudches of Masechta Chullin Shish. What a daf. We saw a lot of stuff. We saw showing a knife to a sage, particularly if you don't show the knife to the sage. When the knife is kosher, excommunication. If the knife is not kosher, if it's possible, so not only excommunication, plus you lose your job and we announce that all your meat is treif. Ravina actually is more chamer. He says that all the above is actually when the knife is kosher. If the knife is possible, well, then we also then cover all the meat and excrement. Now you can't even sell it to Ovdei Kuchavim either. We got up to a new knife, a new Mishnah, slaughtering with a sickle. So if you had slaughtered in a forward direction, kind of with the blade, so that there was no tearing or anything, Beis Shammai says nonetheless it's possible. Beis Hillel says that the meat is tahor, i.e. it's not nevela, but you still can't eat it. He said, Rabbi Yehuda machshir, it's kosher, it is tahor, but you still can't eat it. It's not nevela though. And if, however, you slaughter in a backwards direction, well then, of course, it is going to be possible. And if you the Mishnah said if you smooth out the blade, then it's just a regular knife and it's kosher. In terms of the location for shechita, right, we'll get to agrama in a second, what happens when you go beyond the permitted location. But in terms of the location for shechita, so the Chacham said it's limited to the tabat hagedola. The Chacham said it's limited to the tabat hagedola. Not above to the kova and not below to the other tabaot, nothing. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that it's the tabas hagedola and down, also the rest of the rings. Now, Rav and Shmuel had paskin like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda and said, right, we're not getting to agrama. Rav and Shmuel, however, had essentially, I guess, agreed with the Chachamim on this point, which is also limited to the tabat, not the rest of the tabaot. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says it could be not just the tabat gedola, but also the rest of the tabaot. Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, he had said even from the point of the helmet, the chuda de kova, was that what it was called? The shipui kova, and down, that is kind of the kosher location. And Rish Lakish had the biggest chiddush was even from the very tip, from the very end of the kova. Rish Lakish said that is also kosher, but Rabbi Yochanan said that's a little bit exaggerated, it's a little bit too far. In terms of hagrama, when you go beyond the allowed scope, the Chacham said any deviation is possible. Any deviation is possible. Even if you slaughtered a majority of the way kosherly, but then you, let's say, veered up into the kova, possible. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says as long as a majority of the slice is kosher, well then the shechita is going to be kosher. Gevaldig. Friends, we had said that we paskin like Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, that essentially from the shipui kova and downwards, anywhere in that range is going to be kosher. Friends, that was Daf Yudches of Masechta Chullin. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Cheers.